Hi there, and welcome once again to the Intersex podcast. I am Joanne Roberts. Thank you for listening in to this podcast. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. And if you enjoy listening to this, please give it a like. The title of this podcast today is I Don't Know Why You Told Me That. And that refers to an experience that I had quite a few years ago that I wanted to briefly talk about in this podcast. A few years ago, I was interviewed for a newspaper article about my experiences as somebody with a difference in sexual development, and I was speaking about my experiences mainly during childhood with the medical profession, relating to me having a difference in sexual development and how that impacted my life and the approach that the medical profession took and all of that kind of thing. And it felt very liberating to be talking about it openly to another person and being interviewed for a newspaper article and subsequently reading the newspaper article about it felt very liberating. And I was sort of felt like I was riding the crest of a wave, and in the aftermath of that wanted to tell quite a few people about it, and so I went through a period for a few years where I did tell a few people. Now, we're talking about a handful of people here. We're not talking about dozens of people. We're talking about a handful of people, maybe I'll just say half a dozen people over the course of a few years. And one of them was somebody that I was friends with quite a few years ago, and I wrote a letter. I found it difficult to talk about this face to face. I found it difficult to find the words. And I later had it confirmed for me why that was the case, because I wrote a letter to this person telling them about this difference and how it had impacted my life and the huge impact that it had on my life, and that I had reached a point in my life where I felt able to tell people about it. And the response that I got back was the title of this podcast, and that response was, I don't know why you told me that. So this came as quite a surprise and or a disappointment, and I guess I felt kind of hurt as well, and also kind of foolish. And it kind of bothered me at the time that this person didn't know why it was important to me to talk about this and why it was important to me to tell this person. So that's what I wanted to briefly talk about in this podcast. People seem to have difficulty understanding this. I've heard a lot of people talking about this subject relative to the whole LGBT plus thing, and I've heard people saying things like, I don't need to know about your gender, I don't need to know about your sexuality, I don't need to know about XYZ, whatever it might be. Things pertaining to a person's life and personality and stuff like that. And this kind of seemed to be the viewpoint I think that this person was taking. And they seemed nonplussed by why I had chosen to tell them about this. So I wanted to shed some light on that in this video because I think it's worth talking about. When you go through something which has an absolutely enormous impact on your life, it's natural to want to talk about that with other human beings. Now, say for example, I was adopted. It would be natural at some point that I might want to talk to other people about that. I might want to talk to other people who were also adopted, and I have actually in real life spoken to other intersex people about this topic, but it also makes sense, I think, that at some point or another, if you go through something very life-changing which has a big impact on your life, as this did with me, that you would want to talk about it with friends and family. However, this person didn't seem to understand that. Now, I'm not sure what angle they were coming from. I think that the angle that they were attempting to come from was, it's not a big deal. Now, I actually made a podcast before, if you want to go and listen to that, called It Is a Big Deal, about this exact subject. And people will try to fake nonchalance, and I think that it is fake nonchalance, and we'll try to downplay this, and we'll try to downplay the importance of it in any capacity. But the fact of the matter is, in my life, it has been important. It has had an impact. And I don't think that we're at a point in human evolution whereby a person could be born into this world with a difference in sexual development and be able to say that that didn't have a significant impact on their life. And I think if there are people who have differences in sexual development who say that it hasn't had a big impact on their life, then they're either, as this person was, faking nonchalance, or they're exceptionally lucky. Certainly all of, or the vast overwhelming majority of intersex people I've ever met, either in real life or over the internet, they considered that it was a big deal and that it had had a big impact on their life. And I don't see how it could possibly be any other way if you're being born different in that particular way into a world such as this. So this person, I think, was being a little bit dishonest, and I think that they were trying to downplay it and sort of fake nonchalance in order to mask discomfort. I can't be certain about that. It could be that it genuinely wasn't a big deal to them. That's possible, I guess. It's within the realms of possibility, but that still belies the fact that it was important to me for a number of reasons, and I felt a little bit hurt by this person's response, even though I didn't say that at the time. I think that it's also possible that this person didn't understand what I was talking about, even though I gave them a copy of the newspaper article which explained what the whole thing was, so that's not really possible either. I think more likely it's been a sort of knee-jerk, I don't want to talk about this kind of reaction, which I'm sure a lot of intersex people have had before, but like I said, when somebody has a particular type of experience which changes their life, it doesn't even necessarily have to be for the worse, but when something changes somebody's life and has a big impact on their life, it's natural that at some point or another they're going to want to talk to other human beings about that. And a lot of people kind of have this kind of indirect view that you should only talk about this to other people like yourself. I've come up against that viewpoint before, and people do it in a very subtle, roundabout way, but I'm not really in support of that. My view is, if I want to talk about this to friends and family, I should really be able to. Now I would like to address some of the reasons that I did tell this person about it, and some of the reasons that I felt compelled to mention it to other people as well. There weren't many of them, as I said, there were only around half a dozen. So I wanted to start with what you might call the sort of unconscious reason, and I think one of the main reasons at the time that I was doing it was seeking a feeling of relief. So when you have quite a big secret and you keep that secret for many years, I think that when you tell people about it, you feel this enormous sense of relief. It's like unburdening almost. Even though I don't think I was particularly aware of that at the time, but I can look back now with 2020 hindsight and say that that did play a part in it. Another obvious motivation was, looking for some sort of connection. You're sharing something about your life with another person. Possible looking for validation. It's possible. I'm not saying that it's definite, but it's possible that when I told people about this, I wanted them to say something kind and supportive or, caring. That's possible as well. But I think the main issue that I want to address here, and I think it's an important one, is the issue of loneliness. So I want to try and describe here, and if you haven't experienced something like this, you won't know exactly what I'm talking about, but I wanted to try and convey that when you have something about you, or you have some experience about you which is radically, radically different to the norm in some way, so if you're born with a difference in sexual development, if you don't fit conventional notions of male or female, that sort of puts you in like a perceptual type of isolation whereby you feel kind of separate to a lot of people. The only people that you don't really feel separate from are other people like yourself, but even then, there are sort of limits on human empathy. But certainly the main point that I'm trying to make here is that you feel different to the average man or woman because they're born into a body and a world where their body is considered normal, and then there are people like myself whose bodies are considered to be out with the realms of what is considered to be normal, and it sort of puts you in this perceptual isolation chamber whereby you're kind of feeling different to everybody else, and you desperately want to reach out and ameliorate that loneliness. And in trying to talk to other people about it, people who aren't necessarily like that or don't have any experience of it, I believe that there was an attempt there to feel less lonely. Over the course of my life, I've felt this desperate sense of loneliness and this sort of desperation to reach out and connect with another person, especially as regards this topic. But I have to say that the people of the world that aren't like this, the so-called normal-bodied people, they don't make it very easy. And I'm sure that there will be other intersex people who will hear this podcast and will understand what I'm talking about. They don't always make it easy. Bridging that gap isn't always easy. And I can only do so much. I can try and bridge that gap by telling people about my difference, by telling them about how it makes me feel, and by telling them about how it's affected my life. But if the other person is kind of doing what this person did and is trying to shut me down and is trying to sort of shove this issue back into a dark corner, then there isn't really much more that I can do. So I really just wanted to get that off my chest and talk about this issue, and I do feel that it was hurtful what this person said, although as per my spiritual beliefs, I have to acknowledge that every person I meet represents an aspect of me, so I guess that means that there's an aspect of me that would prefer that I'm not talking about this subject, and that is something that I have to work on. But I did feel hurt by this very obvious attempt to shut down me talking about this subject, because it meant something to me to share some of the details of what I've been through in my life with somebody who I cared about and I thought cared about me. And I would also like to add at this point that I don't really think that people in general, even the sort of friends and family of intersex people, can in some cases fully understand the full extent of what that person has been through. The people like myself who have been in and out of hospital on numerous occasions throughout their childhood, having various things done to their body in the name of making them more normal, which I know is indirectly being done on behalf of society, I don't think people can fully appreciate the full extent of the impact that that has on a person. So I feel that it was very natural for me to want to reach out and talk about this to another human being. And obviously, the disappointment as regards their response is what prompted me to make this podcast, because I don't, if a person with a difference in sexual development reaches out to another human being and has actually managed to be strong and courageous enough to open up about this stuff, I don't really think that "I don't know why you told me that" is an appropriate response. However, like I said, I have to take responsibility for my own feelings, although I definitely think that this was worth talking about, because I do believe there will be other people like myself who have had this experience, and I hope also that somebody who isn't intersex will hear this and will perhaps change their point of view on the matter. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to the Intersex podcast. I am Joanne Roberts. If you haven't subscribed to this podcast already, please do so. Please consider liking this podcast. And if you want to leave a comment, please do so. Thanks again for listening. Bye for now.